You're watching Debate Night in America. We're just a few hours away from history unfolding right here on CNN. Tonight's unprecedented showdown between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is the first time a current and a former president have ever debated, and the first time two candidates have ever faced off before officially accepting their party's nominations. With a stubbornly close election, it could be a make-or-break moment for both men. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Atlanta.
And I'm Caitlin Collins from the CNN Spin Room just outside the debate hall, where these two candidates are going to go head-to-head tonight. President Biden has just touched down here in Georgia, and we are expecting former President Trump to arrive here in the Peach State shortly. The stakes tonight, of course, could not be higher for both candidates after months of polling showing the race in a relative dead heat. Their performances tonight could alter the course of that race and maybe even American history. This is Debate Night in America.
Let's get straight to the final preparations inside both campaigns for tonight's high-stakes debate. Our senior White House correspondent, MJ Lee, is joining us right now. She's got details on President Biden's plans for tonight. MJ, I understand the president has just landed here in Atlanta where we are. What do we know about his final preparations?
Well, Wolf, after the last week of intense debate preparations, these final hours heading into tonight have really felt like the calm before the storm for President Biden. We know that he spent the morning at Camp David with only several of his advisors. They didn't do any mock debates. And the reporters that finally saw him after a week of not seeing him in the last few hours as he has made his way here to Atlanta, he didn't say anything to them. And I asked a Biden advisor what the general mood was like on Air Force One as the team made its way to Atlanta. And this advisor said, feeling good. We are ready to go. But of course, as we know very well, that sort of buoyant message of optimism really doesn't capture the incredible Herculean task that now lies ahead for President Biden. They have done their run-throughs. They have refined their message, their attack lines, the vision that he wants to present. He has prepared for every version of Donald Trump, we were told, that could come up tonight on the debate stage. But the preparations really end there. It is now entirely on President Biden to try to execute on everything that he and his team have prepared for and practiced over the last week. And we are just getting images of the president making a pit stop before heading here to the CNN studios. He was greeted by supporters. They were cheering. He was shaking hands with them. Clearly, it seems like he wanted to get in a good headspace, get a good boost of energy. And one advisor said that Biden's state of mind over the last week heading up to tonight can be summarized by two words, and those two words, Wolf, are focused and determined.
MJ Lee reporting for us. MJ, thank you very much. Now to CNN's Kristen Holmes. She's been working her sources inside the Trump campaign. Kristen, Trump is due to land here in Atlanta in the next hour or so. How has he been spending his final hours preparing?
Well, that's right, Wolf. I just talked to senior advisors. He is wheels up on his way to Atlanta, Georgia for this debate. He is accompanied by some of his closest senior advisors. That includes his campaign managers, Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, as well as Jason Miller. Now, Miller has been a close ally of Donald Trump's for roughly the last 8 years, and he is running point on this debate preparation. Of course, if you ask Donald Trump's advisors, there is no debate preparation. However, Miller has been in charge of arranging and sitting in on these various policy sessions. As we have reported, they have ranged from anything from how to answer questions on abortion and democracy to how to pivot to the economy and immigration, as well as inflation. Now, they are expected to land here, as you noted, around 5:30. I have talked to people close to Donald Trump who say that he is in a good, confident mindset. As MJ said, it's really up to Donald Trump. and Joe Biden of who shows up here today and how that performance lands. Now, various allies who have spoken to him say that Donald Trump knows the gravity of the situation tonight, that he knows what is on the table and that he will remain focused. But if you talk to those who are close to them, they also acknowledge that you never know what version of Donald Trump you are going to get. They have been watching carefully what is coming out of Camp David, how Biden himself has been preparing, and they have been preparing in reaction to that. Again, they say that he is ready, that he is confident in tonight, and that he's going to stay on message. However, again, you never know which version of Donald Trump is going to show up here and whether or not President Joe Biden is able to get under his skin.
Kristen Holmes reporting from the CNN Spin Room here in Atlanta. Kristen, thank you very much. Right now, we want to bring you a behind-the-scenes look at the stage where the two candidates are set to debate, just 5 hours or so from now. CNN's Boris Sanchez is joining us from inside the debate hall. Boris, walk us through how tonight will go.
Wolf, the floors have been swept, the lighting has been tweaked, and the microphones have been laid out. The stage is set for a historic night. A sitting president taking on a former president head-to-head right here on CNN. At 9 p.m., that hallway. And then Donald Trump will walk out through here, and they'll approach these podiums, which are exactly 8 feet apart. Let's talk about the actual rules while they're here at the podium. They cannot sit, they cannot bring notes, and they cannot confer with campaign officials when we're in a commercial break. They're only allowed to have 3 things up here. That is pens, and we'll take a close look at them, the pens, the paper, and a glass of water, and maybe a towel as well in case they start sweating. The most important component, the most important thing on this podium, other than this microphone, is this set of lights right here. Remember the rules, Wolf. A candidate's microphone will be muted once their allotted time to speak is up. This will be green when the microphone is on. It'll turn red once their time is expired. Let's give you a view now of where the moderators are going to be sitting. This is what the candidates are going to be seeing tonight. You're going to have Dana Bash and Jake Tapper moderating this debate and asking questions of the candidates. How exactly is it going to work? They will ask one candidate an overarching question. The candidate will then have 2 minutes to respond. His opponent will have 1 minute for a rebuttal, and then the original candidate will have another minute to respond to the rebuttal. Aside from that, the two moderators are going to have the opportunity to ask a follow question, and then the candidates will have a minute to respond to that follow. How are they going to be able to tell time given all those cues? There is a light, a colored light on top of the cameras where the candidates are going to be facing. When they have 15 seconds left in their response, this is going to turn yellow. When they have 5 seconds, it'll start flashing red. And then when their time is expired, it'll be a steady red light on top of the camera. So they will know, and it'll be every camera in the studio, so they'll know exactly when their time to talk is up. Now, one question that has been lingering over this debate is about the muting of the microphones. You have to remember, these podiums are only 8 feet apart. So even if a candidate's microphone is muted, we at home may not be able to distinguish exactly what they're saying, but there's no question that the other candidate standing only a few feet away is going to be able to hear them, and potentially that may lead to interruptions. It may lead to responses to something that we haven't heard from the other candidate. It'll be potentially tricky, it'll be intense, and it'll be right here on CNN at 9 p.m., Wolf.
And all of these rules for the debate tonight have been approved by both candidates. Boris Sanchez, thanks very, very much. Just ahead, our details from our team of reporters on what's happening right now behind the scenes and the final hours before tonight's face-off. And Caitlin Collins is joined by an all-star panel wargaming the mission for both sides. Stay right here.
The night that we have all been waiting for is finally here. We are live right now from the Spin Room. That's what you're looking at here on set. Soon, that red carpet that you see will be filled with politicos and surrogates after the debate, spinning how their candidate did during this 90-minute historic debate here on CNN. President Biden arrived here in Atlanta a short while ago, and we do expect President Trump to be here on the ground soon ahead of that epic rematch between the two. The president climbing down from Air Force One, Trump on his plane shortly. I am lucky to be surrounded by a team of powerhouses as we look ahead to this debate. We have Republican strategist Shermichael Singleton and 4 CNN political commentators here joining us. Jonah Goldberg, who is the editor-in-chief and co-founder of The Dispatch. Ashley Allison, the former National Coalitions Director for the Biden 2020 campaign. Kristen Soltis Anderson, a Republican strategist and pollster. And Bakari Sellers, a former South Carolina state rep. I think we have got the resume of every single political job that you ever could have held on this panel. So obviously that is why you're the experts. And a spin room, for a lot of people who are like, what is a spin room, is where all of the candidates, surrogates come after their allies. Reporters are also in here listening to them, asking them how the debate went. But Bakari, looking at this, I mean, these two men have not been in the same room, much less 8 feet apart from each other in 4 years. And it's just striking to think, they haven't been in a moment where they're debating each other in a sense like this since 2020.
So this environment is palpable, and I think the word of the night, I've been thinking about all this entire day, the word of the night is energy. It's so much energy here in the spin room. It's so much energy in Atlanta. Everybody's talking about it. The streets are shut down. People are going in different directions. And what we have to see from both of these candidates, 1, because it's 9 o'clock, 2, because of their age, and 3, because, like you said, they hadn't been together in so long, is energy. I expect to see more of a docile type of Donald Trump, trying to stay on message. Low energy Donald Trump is what we call him, but I expect Joe Biden to be somebody who brings a lot of energy, particularly in the first 15, 20 minutes, because that is when this debate is won. Mike Tyson, the great American poet, once said that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And so I want to see who's going to come out and throw the first punch, and I'm expected to see Joe Biden come out with that energy at 9:01, showing that he can serve another 4 years.
Yeah, Shermichael, I mean, we've been hearing, I've been talking to people in both of these campaigns, and I do think they are going to both come out of the gate here ready to go.
I mean, I think so, but I just hope that President Biden is careful and doesn't trip over himself in the first 10 or 15 minutes, because that isn't going to look good for him. Look, I think Donald Trump has one key message here, Caitlin. That is to showcase that he is capable to lead the country again for another 4 years. It's a showcase that despite what our opinions may be about him, because of the rallies, because of some of the tweets that we see on Truth Social, that he is principally concerned with the issues that impact everyday Americans, those kitchen table issues. As James Carville once said, it's the economy stupid 32 years ago, it's still the economy stupid today, and Donald Trump needs to showcase that he's in the best position to improve the economic condition of hardworking Americans, and I think that's his #1 objective.
Jonah, what are you going to be looking for in the first 20 critical minutes that are going to be playing out here?
I'm mostly looking forward to seeing how quickly their plans evaporate. And I mean, and I agree with the energy thing. I mean, it's a little like Brian Fontana and Anchorman at Panda Watch, right? I mean, we're into this. But I think that they're going to have I generally think that presidential debates don't really matter much. I think this is different because in a lot of ways, for good reasons and bad, it's a vibes election, and this is sort of going to be a vibes debate. We have 2 essentially literal or figurative incumbent candidates. We've never had that before in a televised debate or really in an election at all. And they're not here to introduce themselves to voters. Voters know who these people are. They have 100% name ID. They're here to reassure voters. And Trump needs to reassure people that he's not going to bring more chaos like he did the last time. And Biden needs to reassure people that he's up to the job for another 4 years. And that's a weird debate strategy to have to implement when the other guy's trying to trip you up at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this push and pull of like, is this about the past or this about the future? And I think it has to be the whole story. It has to be, don't forget what type of president Donald Trump was. Don't forget what he has been doing the last 4 years since he hasn't been president. Don't forget what happened a couple weeks ago where he is the only person running for president that now has 34 felony convictions. And looking at the camera, Joe Biden, I know what I can do for you, the American people. I know things are not perfect, but this is why I am ready for the job. I do think that this debate will be won in the first 15 to 20 minutes, and then it will be won on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. Because if one of these candidates have a memeable moment or a clippable moment, that is what folks who still might not be paying close attention to the debate tonight will be paying attention to tomorrow. So You win it in the first 20 and then don't stumble for the rest of the race.
Well, and I think one thing that's notable is that we're even here, that we are sitting in a spin room right now, because a few months ago it was not guaranteed that we'd even have a presidential debate this election cycle.
No, absolutely. And I think what's fascinating to me is that I always assumed that Donald Trump, for all of his bluster about saying, I'll debate you anywhere, anytime, he is currently leading very slightly in the polls. So in some ways, he has the most to lose here, because any outcome of this debate that dramatically reshapes the race, sure, it could dramatically reshape it by causing Democrats to go, whoa, Biden was so bad, we need a new strategy. But there's also a chance that it goes just bad enough for Trump that suddenly he loses that edge that he's had over the last couple of months. So that's why I think, well, if you are a Biden fan, you have to be watching this debate like through closed fingers, like, please, please, please pull it off. In some ways, it's actually Trump that may have slightly more to lose.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen nothing shake up this race. The conviction didn't do much to change the numbers that we were looking at. So that is a moment that both campaigns were hoping to avoid one that's bad, but also hoping to strike one that does stick in voters' minds and could prove something that actually does make movement here, because the next debate's not for several months.
I oftentimes reject the premise that the race hasn't been shaken up, mainly because nobody's paying attention. Tonight is the first night that people will tune in and watch. Tonight is the first night that people will have an opportunity to see both of these men outside of the caricatures that everybody tries to make about them. We've seen Trump come out of court, or you've seen the clips of Biden tripping on X, and you've seen those things. But this is the first time that the American public is really going to be able to lay eyes on both of them. And I've spoken to Cedric Richmond and I've spoken to Julie Rodriguez, two people who are very influential that I have a great deal of respect for in Biden world. And what they want to do is put a mirror up to Donald Trump and say, look, do not forget the chaos that was 4 years ago. This country, voters in this country, we have a very, very, very short memory. You know, it's so McDonaldized. We just, you know, we speak in tweets. We remember something that happened 30 minutes ago. We listen to podcasts. That's about it. So there is a nostalgia for Donald Trump, and sometimes people don't remember the chaos that surrounded it. Tonight, Joe Biden has to put that mirror up and say, look, this dude crazy. You want me, or you want this dude who's crazy?
And you know what? I've been thinking a little bit today. There is an energy in the city, and I'm giving you up. Okay, I'm co-signing.
Thank you.
There is an energy in the city, and I can sometimes be a glass half empty type of person in this political environment. But this morning I woke up and I was reminded, we talk about democracy. This is democracy in action. So for voters who are like, the system doesn't work for me, for voters who are like, I don't know if I want to go vote, there is a free press out here right now, and we are covering it. And you can say something I don't like, and I can say something you don't like, but we're allowed to say that in America, because that is democracy. Today, we had the Supreme Court come out with important decisions. Some were for Democrats, some were for Republicans. That is democracy. Tonight, we are going to see two candidates. It could not be more different, but that is democracy. And so when people are saying it doesn't matter, that is at stake. All of that is at stake. The fact that you even get to decide whether you want to vote or not is democracy. So tonight is really important, but I think there's also an opportunity for the surrogates in the room tonight, in this spin room, for everyone watching and having conversations at their kitchen table before or after this debate to really understand what is at stake when we say Donald Trump could win this, and try and strip it all away, because he's made threats about it, and I don't take him lightly with his threats.
And there are even Republicans who are looking at this and not sure who to vote for. I mean, right here in Georgia, 78,000 Georgians voted for Nikki Haley in the primary here. She wasn't even on the ballot. She was on the ballot, but she had dropped out of the race by then. The Georgia governor, who was just here in the spin room being followed around by reporters a few moments ago, told me yesterday that he did not vote for Donald Trump. He will be voting for him this November, but he just left his ballot blank. So there are those voters as well, Republicans, who will be watching to see, which candidate are they going to go with if they're undecided.
Yeah, I mean, like when you say there's a lot of differences between these candidates, there is a lot of differences between these candidates. But for voters right now, like, a lot of issues don't seem to matter very much. Biden very much wants to make democracy the issue of the election. Donald Trump is not losing on that issue, according to the polls. Like, the Biden campaign is married to this idea of what ought to be rather than what is, in terms of what defining people. And I think there are a lot of voters, sadly the voters who are going to decide this election, they don't think there's that much difference between these two guys. They see two old guys who look like they should be fighting over the check at an early bird dinner at Denny's. I mean, like, it's two old, cranky, grumpy old men are going to have a fight. And that I don't know that it helps either of them.
That visual. Jonah Goldberg, thanks everyone. Don't worry, they're all sticking around. We have much more to talk about because tonight's highly anticipated debate is coming, as Ashley just mentioned, on the same day of that major Supreme Court decision that does allow emergency abortions in Idaho, but there's a limit to that. I'll talk with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who said that today's ruling is, quote, far from a victory. We are back live from the CNN Spin Room on the side of tonight's historic presidential debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. And just hours before that debate happened, the debate is happening, Supreme Court handed down a major decision in one of the most anticipated cases of this Supreme Court term. The court is now voting to allow emergency abortions in Idaho when a pregnant patient's health is at serious risk. Idaho has one of the strictest abortion bans in the nation, as we know. And this 6-3 decision, which was briefly posted yesterday online by mistake, I should note, and was reflected, and then they officially released it today, it grants a temporary win for reproductive rights advocates while the case will continue to move through the lower courts. Joining me on this ruling and much more, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. And Senator, it's great to have you here in the Spin Room.
Great to be here, Caitlin.
I know a place that you are deeply familiar with.
And there is a lot of energy, and seeing this red carpet, seeing President Biden arrive reminded me of how he was before those primary debates a few years ago. Just a lot of enthusiasm. He loves talking to people. Other candidates are burrowed down, and he is just, hey, talking to people, which I think is him. So it was fun to see that, and it is great to be here with you. So
well, and you know, one of the things that he's been at Camp David for several days now preparing for this moment, for this arrival here in Atlanta. Obviously, one of the things we know he is planning to hit former President Trump on, based on our reporting, is reproductive rights and what that looks like. And so I wonder how the Supreme Court ruling today on Idaho, how that affects his strategy or how you think he should utilize that on the stage.
Well, good question. And as you know, this Idaho law, like what we're seeing in other states as well, there have literally been women bleeding out in parking lots to be close to the hospital in the emergency room because they've been told, we can't give you the reproductive care you need, we can't give you the abortion until you're near death. That's what this is about. So the court has basically punted. They are not ruling on this at this time, which allows the court decision out of the Idaho case to stand. But it is by no means a victory, and it is the point that President Biden will make. We need to codify Roe v. Wade into law. And you have a clear difference in the visions of these two candidates. You have President Biden working to codify Roe v. Wade, standing up for women's rights, and then you have President Trump, who only recently very clearly said that he was proudly the person responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade because of the judges that he had appointed.
Yeah, but when President Biden, he does often talk about codifying Roe versus Wade. I mean, he can't do that obviously on his own. That has to do with the body that you serve in, with the House as well. And I think what about voters who look at that and say that doesn't seem realistic in this moment, that actually is going to happen on Capitol Hill? What can President Biden himself do on this issue?
I think it is completely realistic because many odds makers predict that we're going to win the House of Representatives, and I think we can get this done. Right now, that House is run by Republicans. And so I think it is a realistic point, and it's going to be on voters' minds as it was in the prairies of Kansas when they came out in droves and voted on a referendum on this, in Ohio, in the Virginia legislative races, in the Wisconsin Supreme Court races. Women and the men that stood with them stood up and said, you know what? We may not agree with everything with the Democrats, but man, we're not going to let our freedoms be taken away. We don't like this Donald Trump, who says he wants to be a dictator from day one. All of this is going to be, I would predict, on the debate stage tonight.
You were on that debate stage with President Biden when he was Vice President Biden. And when he comes out, and speaking of Trump's criminal conviction, do you want to hear him just flat out call Trump a convicted felon? How do you think he should approach that on the stage tonight?
I think it's a fair point of debate. He is facing someone who has 91 federal and state felony indictments, someone who has been convicted over 30 times for crimes. That's a big deal. You haven't seen that before in a presidential race. And President Biden believes in the rule of law. He's appointed judges that believe in the rule of law. So I think it is fair game for him to talk about in this debate, and I hope he does bring it up.
What about about his age? That's another big concern that we've seen from voters. Obviously, neither of these candidates is exactly young. Do you think it's something that President Biden references directly, or does a vigorous performance, if that's what we see, like the State of the Union speaks for itself, how does a candidate handle something like that?
Well, first of all, they're very close in age, so let's not forget that.
78 and 81.
And I would take 81 over 91. That would be 91 indictments for criminal behavior, which Trump has. But I think that you are correct on this. The way President Biden showed up in a big way at the State of the Union, the way he was able to handle people yelling at him, hecklers, he just went on, he was strong. But you see the same thing at Normandy. You see the same thing where the president shows up as a commander-in-chief. He does it all the time. That's his job. And that's what I believe you're going to see tonight on that debate stage.
We will see. Senator Klobuchar, great to have you here in the spin room. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kayla.
And just ahead, the candidates are going to be speaking to the American public tonight, as the senator noted. They will be doing it, though, from one of the most crucial swing states in the 2020 election. We'll see the role it plays in the 2024 election. We are here in Georgia, of course, and the Republican governor, Brian Kemp, will join Wolf right after a quick break.
The countdown is on. Less than 4 hours and a half until the history is being made right here on CNN. And the location of tonight's debate is worth noting. Not only is it the birthplace of CNN, but also a crucial swing state, which President Biden narrowly won back in 2020 on his way to the White House. Joining us now is Georgia's Republican governor, Brian Kemp. Governor, thank you so much for joining us. We always love coming back to Georgia. You told our colleague Caitlin Collins yesterday that Trump should focus on the future and the issues in tonight's debate. Do you think Trump can stick to that script?
I think he can. I mean, he has a great ability to contrast with the president's message and make the case to the American people that they can't afford 4 more years of Joe Biden. And that's what I'm hearing from people every day, Wolf. When they go to the grocery store, they're mad. When they're going to the gas station, they're mad. They're mad when they're seeing stories of, terrorists coming across the southern border and a lot of people that are here illegally and the crime that comes along with that and just the tragic things that have happened. And so, I think there's a clear contrast. He's got to stay focused on making that and stay focused on the future and telling people, why it's going to be better for you the next 4 years under my leadership versus the current administration.
You also revealed in that interview with Caitlin that you did not vote for Trump in your state's Republican primary. Listen to how your former lieutenant governor, Jeff Duncan, reacted to that. Listen to this.
Brian Kemp has earned the right to do whatever he wants when he walks in that ballot box. He's been a great governor. He's certainly led this state through a bunch of difficult times, and he's used conservative principles to do it. But I think it speaks to the broader sense of Republicans that they just have this angst amongst them. We know in our gut that Donald Trump is not the right person.
So how much did that broader angst in the Republican Party about Trump impact your choice not to vote for him in the Republican primary?
Yeah, well, I'm not too worried about angst or things that happened in the past. Look, the primary was over when it got here. He was the presumptive nominee at the time, and I'm looking forward, and I know he is too. I mean, look, there's a lot of Republicans that have voted for a lot of different people over this process, but all that doesn't matter right now, Wolf. What matters is that, we're focused on the future. I've said all along when the primary started, when there was a lot of great Republicans running for president, that I was going to support the nominee. That's what we're doing today. We're focused on our ground game here in the state, making sure that we're holding our legislative majorities. I had a fundraiser this week for former Governor Larry Hogan from Maryland, hoping he can win a Senate seat and get control of the Senate back. We're helping, Speaker Johnson hold the House, and we want to control the White House. And, I'm on board doing that. So that's why I'm staying focused on the future. And that's really been my advice to former President Trump, too, to stay focused on the future. Tell people why they should vote for us and why the Republican agenda will be better for you over the next 4 years than the Biden agenda has been.
We're told, Governor, that President Biden is going to paint Trump as a threat to democracy tonight and January 6th as a seismic watershed for American voters. How should Trump handle that?
Well, I think he should just turn that back on President Biden, not get distracted by those type accusations, not get bogged down in the politicization that you've seen of the justice system from the other side and from the Democrats. and really stay focused on what the people that are undecided in this race, the people that, he did not get in the last election, that he needs to get in this one to be able to beat Joe Biden. And it is a pocketbook election. A lot of people that voted for Joe Biden last time, they're worse off now than they were 4 years ago. And former President Trump has a great opportunity to bring those folks back in the fold if he's talking about issues, as he's comparing records and speaking about the future. And I believe he's going to focus on that tonight. If he does, he's going to have a really good night. If he doesn't and gets bogged down on the things that the president's trying to push him into, he's not going to have a good night.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for the hospitality here in Georgia. And coming up, our political experts are standing by with more news and analysis just ahead of tonight's historic face-off between President Biden and former President Trump. You're watching Debate Night in America.
Right now, the final preparations are underway for a historic moment in American politics. Certainly this debate, the first ever debate between a current and a former president. It is all happening just hours from now right here on CNN. Our political team is back with us. We are inside the spin room where all of the surrogates and allies of these candidates will be here with us after. And as you look at this debate and we talk about what the issues are going to be here, one thing that I've been thinking about is obviously these two men have great disdain for one another. They're certainly not fans of one another. The first debate in 2020 between the two of them became very personal very quickly. And I don't think there's any doubt that could certainly resurrect itself on that stage tonight.
Oh, it most certainly could resurrect itself. I mean, Chris Wallace said he believes that it probably ultimately led to Trump losing the election. I mean, I think he fell 4 or 5 points, and Chris said he never recovered. I mean, this is why I said the former president really has to showcase stability in this moment. There is a serious level of disillusionment, I would argue, among the greater American populace, and they do remember a moment in time, the first 2 years of the Trump administration, where the economy was vibrant, where it was viable, where they did feel secure about their economic future. That is no longer the case. And so the former president has, I would argue, Caitlin, an incredible opportunity to articulate a vision forward for the American people who are looking for an out for what they see as a very chaotic and uncertain moment. People want to feel security about their future with their children. They want to feel confident that they can build a family. We're seeing less Americans start families at earlier stages of their lives. We're seeing less Americans buy their first homes. We're seeing college students graduate with an inability to live in a major city comfortably. And so people are wondering which of these two men can build that future that provides security. And I think the person who articulates that the greatest will have an advantage out of this debate.
So I think you've got it right, that this is going to be a debate about who's going to provide security and stability. And what's so interesting is that earlier in our discussion, there was a lot of talk about how Donald Trump is Mr. Chaos and that there's going to be a lot of attempts by Joe Biden to bring that chaotic, unstable Donald Trump out. But it is worth noting that Donald Trump is going to try to make the same case about Joe Biden. The ad that his campaign released today included things like clips from the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. You know, we in the political punditry world sometimes try to separate out the personality from the issues, but voters don't really see it that way. And the personality of these two men, is Joe Biden strong, with it, able to be a leader? Is Donald Trump able to hold back the crazy for just a little bit? That's critically tied to the way they think they would handle the economy, immigration, and more.
Well, and we're already seeing the talking points come out. I mean, obviously, every candidate prepares lines for this. Donald Trump is actually posting the lines that were sent to him by a former top EPA official when it comes to the climate. But we've also seen Trump previewing what his arguments are going to be on democracy. Obviously, that's a huge issue for President Biden that he cares deeply about. President Trump saying today on Truth Social, you know, actually it's Biden who's the greatest threat to democracy. He often takes threats or takes criticisms of him and turns it around on whoever is labeling him with that.
So there are two things. I would push back on my good friends and colleagues and say that while they may reminisce about the first 2 years of the Trump administration, we remember things like a Muslim ban. We remember things like the instability in the Department of Justice. I remember he had a guy who was the Attorney General for about 13 seconds. I can't even remember his name. Matt Whitaker was his name. And you continue to see the architect of January 6th. You remember Charlottesville, good people on both sides. And that is kind of the chaos that people think about or remember when they talk about Donald Trump. On the flip side, this is what Joe Biden has to do, and this is where Democrats drive me crazy. You cannot put your head in the sand on issues like crime, inflation, and immigration. And you cannot say, even though I can tell you right here, I can look dead in the camera and say, look, in major cities, violent crime is decreasing. We know that. We know that inflation is plateauing. We can see that. But the problem is people don't feel that. And we cannot ignore that. And Democrats have put their head in the sand for a very long period of time, particularly on those 3 issues. And Joe Biden has to be able to answer for that and then get out of it, pivot, and talk about what the future will look like. Is he nimble enough to do that? I would argue yes, but those are going to be 3 issues that can get him on the defensive. And if he does not answer them well, it's going to be a hell of a night for those people they put in the spin room. I will be at the bar, but those people that kind of come into the spin room are going to have hell to pay.
They might be like hiding around the corners of the spin room.
I think it is. Issues are really important in this debate. But I guess I would say I wouldn't do it in a laundry list. I did this, I did this, I did this. Now, the focus groups that I've observed have, when people actually hear what Joe Biden has done for them, they're like, oh, I like that. I support that. So it's not working to do a laundry list. We've tried that for 3.5 years, and the poll numbers are still where they are. I recommend personalizing this. Talk about the plant that Donald Trump couldn't keep open, but Joe Biden kept open. Talk about how the CHIPS Act in Arizona is booming and money is going into the state. Talk about how today we had a Supreme Court decision that just kicked the can down, and how we're actually having a debate of whether a doctor could provide emergency medical care for a woman. Is that the country we live in? And then tell the story. Identify the person in the state, connect the dots, make the American people see those stories as themselves. And when we do, we see those numbers move in Joe Biden's favor. I'll say to your point, Michael, sure, perhaps people remember that the economy under the first 2 years of Donald Trump were good. But you know why? Because he inherited an economy that Barack Obama and Joe Biden built for him. And then when the COVID hit, he failed. He was a terrible leader. We weren't even able to do things like this 4 years ago because Donald Trump told us to put bleach in our bodies. And then Joe Biden got it. He's passed more legislation to get our economy back on track. Are the American public feeling it now? No, not yet. But if we quit and we revert back to Donald Trump, it will get worse.
But if not now, then when will people feel it? I mean, there's a reason,
you know
Ashley.
How policies
but there's
work.
a reason, Ashley, that people look at the former president and they do believe, whether rightfully or not, and we can get into the semantics of this, but they do believe that under Donald Trump he would do a better job restoring the economic conditions of this country. They do believe that Donald Trump would do a better job securing the border. They do believe that Donald Trump did a better job avoiding some of the foreign conflicts that we now see under the Biden administration.
No, they believe that if Donald Trump got into office, he would rip families apart again. That babies would be crying in cages without their mother that took months to reunite. That's what I remember.
And the majority of Americans actually agree with Donald Trump of removing illegal migrants out of the country.
Border crossings are down lower right now in this moment under Joe Biden than they were under Donald Trump.
So they're lower for a week.
The people who agree with you are already going to vote for Joe Biden.
Correct.
The problem is the people who are left that are still persuadable, and it's a small number of people. And the problem I think that Joe Biden, look, it's a weird situation. In 2020, Joe Biden ran as a generic Democrat because Americans were like, all we need is a generic Democrat to get rid of Donald Trump. That's all we want.
He distanced himself from the left
in
those debates.
He was vanilla. He was helped by COVID with the whole running from the basement thing. He was bland. You couldn't turn him into some sort of radical or anything like that kind of stuff because he'd been around for 50 years. People knew who he was. Now he's got a record. And for incumbent presidents at the end of their first term running for re-election, the argument that they want to make is don't change horses in midstream. All the polls are screaming that a lot of people want to change horses in midstream. They just look at the other horse and they're like, I know that horse. And so it gives them an opening. If a generic Republican, if it had been Nikki Haley or Governor Kemp, who is on the ticket right now, I think you'd be looking at a blowout landslide for the Republicans.
Yeah, 2 presidents, 2 records that voters know very well and can judge. We'll see what they decide. Obviously, we'll see how they defend them tonight, at least on stage. Our countdown is continuing. We're going to take an inside look at the debate hall. What does it look like where Donald Trump and Joe Biden will be side by side in just a few hours from now? We'll also remind you about what the debate rules are. They're unlike anything we've seen at presidential debates before. All of that after a quick break. It It is debate night here in America, and we are now just 4 hours away from a pivotal moment in the razor-thin race for the White House. It is the CNN presidential debate. I'm Caitlin Collins, live from the CNN Spin Room, which is just steps away from that debate hall where President Biden and former President Trump are preparing to face off for the first time in 4 years. It's also the first time that a current and former President Wolf have ever debated.
And I'm Wolf Blitzer in Atlanta. We're covering tonight's historic showdown from every angle. Both candidates hoping to land new attacks and speak directly to voters as they try to shake up a race that's been deadlocked for months. Right now, our political team is gathering new information inside both campaigns as we count down to the most consequential event of the election, at least so far. You're watching Debate Night in America.
And we start off this hour with CNN's Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, obviously a big question here is about the rules for this debate. That's what makes it unique and different from what we saw when these two candidates were last on stage together in 2020. Give us an overview of exactly what it's going to look like inside that debate hall tonight.
Well, Caitlin, it certainly does. And we should point out both campaigns, both candidates have agreed to these rules. And the rules are there will be no audience. And that will be dramatically different from the debates 4 years ago and certainly other debates we've seen. In fact, it will be more like the first televised presidential debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, where there was just the two candidates and the moderators in the studio. So it will be the candidates who will be standing just 8 feet apart. This will be at close range, to say the least. And the two men, as you said, have not been in the same room for 4 years. They've been, of course, campaigning and dueling from long distance. They will be at close range tonight. They are not allowed to bring in any notes. They are not allowed to have any advisors, even during the 2 commercial breaks. So they will be standing there. We will see if they engage with one another. But perhaps one of the biggest changes from the first debate last time, which was filled with interruptions and hectoring from at the time, President Donald Trump to former Vice President Joe Biden, is the microphones. The microphones will only be on for the candidates who are speaking at that time. They will have a couple minutes to answer the questions, and then they will have 1 minute to rebut. But again, the microphone only on when the candidate who is being directed a question will speak. So we will see how that changes the dynamic of this. But it will not be until after the debate is over, 90 minutes long. They'll be standing on stage where they will be joined by one guest. If it's a family member or friend, we shall see. But that is the only time they will have a lifeline, if you will, after the debate is over. So it's extraordinary, Caitlin. These two candidates, very practiced, of course, have been on so many stages. They will be standing alone tonight, 8 feet apart, right here in Atlanta.
Yeah, neither of them is a stranger to the debate stage, but they might be a little rusty. They haven't been on it in 4 years. Right. Certainly not, in this kind of sense that we are going to see here tonight with each other. And obviously, Jeff, that likely influences how these campaigns were preparing for tonight. What have you heard from officials in both camps about how the rules and how all of these changes are factoring into what it's going to look like when they get on stage?
Look, they both are trying to do a similar thing and shake up the race to make voters see them as the best alternative for a second term. For the Biden side, they are trying to remind voters, shake them, if you will, to remind people of the Trump administration, what he did during his 4 years in office, and his plans for a second term, should he make them. They're trying to disqualify him in the minds of voters, but also trying to sort of get Democrats and others who may not be thrilled about a Biden second term to see him as a unacceptable alternative. But for the Trump side, they are focusing on Biden's record. Caitlin, that is probably the biggest difference of these debates overall, is that Biden now has a presidential record. He has stood on so many debate stages, but this is the first time that he has his own record on inflation, on the economy, on immigration, and indeed foreign affairs. So this will not be simply talking about the Trump record as happened 4 years ago. Both records will be side by side, but that is where history may not be our best guide here. We have two incumbent presidents. They both have a practice record. The question here is style and stamina. Talking to voters here in Georgia this week, Caitlin, perhaps they're not interested in the nuance of policy as much as which one looks the most presidential, which one looks strong. Again, standing for 90 minutes. It's not easy. So we will see how each one of these candidates do tonight. But it's 90 minutes on stage, but this will linger for far longer, likely for the rest of the campaign. Caitlin?
Yeah. Both records will be scrutinized. We'll see how they defend them. Jeff Zeleny, thank you for that. And Bakari Sellers, part of my all-star panel that's back here with me, that is a great point that Jeff makes, is last time, President Biden was on stage, he had not yet been president. He didn't have a record to defend in the same sense that Donald Trump did, certainly not because of the coronavirus pandemic. But the other thing is not even what they're going to say. It's the fact that they are 8 feet apart from one another. And Chris Wallace, who is one of 2 people who knows what it's like to moderate a debate with these two, he said that's much closer than they were in that first debate of 2020. They were not standing anywhere near that close.
So there are a couple of things about one, and Jonah brought this up earlier, defending his record. He now has a presidential record to run on. And I think we all know that for Joe Biden, it's about the record, but that's really secondary on voters' minds. It's how he looks when he defends his record. People want to know that Joe Biden can do the job. He's 81 years old. We know that. I hate the fact that we try to say one is old and the other is 78. They're both old, right? And so he has to look the part. He has to be energetic, at least for the first few moments, because 90 minutes is a long time to be on that stage. You don't get to feed off the energy of anybody else. You don't get to beat up on little Marco or lying Ted. There's nobody else's wife to call ugly on. It's just you and another human being. The problem also, when you're talking about staying locked in, if it's basketball, I'm like, look, Biden, stay locked in for 90 minutes. You cannot let up on this guy. You got to stay locked in. But because they're so close and because the mic's cut off, I do not believe that when the mic cuts off, Donald Trump is going to cut off. And my fear is that may pose some presentation difficulty for the President of the United States. Because it's hard as hell to communicate about Afghanistan, foreign policy, Gaza, healthcare. When you have somebody yelling over here, the audience can't hear, but it sounds crazy to you. And I think that type of closeness, just aesthetically and presentation, may pose some issues for the president.
Because bear in mind, remember in the last debate when he said, "Will you shut up, man?" That was one of those moments that went really viral and made Biden look a little more vigorous, a little more, he was kind of channeling the inner thoughts of a lot of people watching. But if you can't hear what Donald Trump is saying that he wants him to shut up, man, about, maybe that changes things. I mean, bear in mind, Donald Trump came up in the world of television. Television is a medium he understands and excels at. What will be a challenge for him, I think, is that Donald Trump does best when he gets to be in kind of celebrity Donald Trump mode, apprentice Donald Trump mode. And this is very presidential. This is very historic, much more significantly traditional. And so it'll be curious to see how does he handle it.
Can I ask a question to my 3 Republican friends for a second?
Sure.
I'm intrigued. Can Donald Trump talk substantive policy for 90 minutes? Does he have the ability to do that?
I don't think so. I just be blunt. I think
Ashley's the Democrat who's playing it.
I don't need to be a Republican.
technically I'm a conservative, but I don't really call myself a Republican anymore. Look, I think he's going to try to be really disciplined for the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes, right? And then he's going to feel like he ate his spinach, and now he gets to have his dessert and start. And he's going to look. I mean, the way I think about this is he's never been able to stay on script unless he's actually reading a script, right? He's also, historically, the first debates always go badly for incumbent presidents because they spent 4 years as a president and everyone's saying yes to them and blah, 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 blah. Donald Trump has spent 4 years at Mar-a-Lago surrounded by an entourage that tells him everything he says is brilliant. So he hasn't been criticized from 8 feet away in the last 4 years, in the last 8 years, except on a debate. So I think they're both eminently ratable. You can get under their skin. The problem is, to Kristen's point, is how does it look when Joe Biden or Donald Trump perfectly legitimately says off camera, "Will you shut up?" and no one has any idea why they're saying it.
I think that's an important part, though. It's not just the audio. It's a visual debate. The split screen tonight is going to be important.
Yeah.
If you're a candidate talking to a television screen like, who do you think is gonna? Don't make that a meme, y'all. But if that's how you're talking, it will look strange to the American public. So when people break the rules, I think it's important to be able to show that picture.
Because that was one of, when you go back and rewatch the debates, as I dedicated my life to doing this week, you see that oftentimes Biden would look directly at the camera. When Trump was speaking a lot and chattering in his ear, he would just look directly at the camera and say, okay, it doesn't matter about my family or his family, it matters about your family. And it seemed to be an effective method. But Sharmichael, let me ask you about something we're just learning, which is Mary Trump, who is Donald Trump's niece. She is an estranged niece. She has by no means been a fan of his. She wrote a book incredibly critical of him. We've just learned that she is going to be here in this spin room tonight, not on behalf of the Trump family, but she is joining the Biden campaign as a surrogate. I don't think Donald Trump will be surprised to know that she's not supporting him, but what do you make of the fact that she's coming out here and she's saying, in a quote tonight that CNN's just obtaining, she's in Atlanta to remind everyone who Donald Trump is as a person and how he would rule as a president because the stakes are far too high, Mary Trump says, for us to get this wrong. And she says that he can't be now allowed near the levers of power again.
I don't think it's going to matter for Republican voters, and I would go as far as to say that some of Trump supporters would frankly see it as a betrayal. I mean, this is a niece. You're going against your own family member, whether you like him or not. Perhaps this is something that you should deal with behind closed doors. But I wanted to say something about President Biden. This is, I think, one of his greatest strengths and assets. The president has a very, very unique ability to showcase compassion during turbulent and uncertain times. We've talked a lot about the economic conditions. We've talked a lot about immigration. And I think President Biden could have an opportunity, if he so chooses, to talk directly to the American people about understanding where they are. I think he has an opportunity to say, because of my age, yeah, I've slowed down a little bit, but I've seen a whole lot of things. I do understand what it takes to sort of rebuild when things are sort of faulty and shaky. I think he has an opportunity to articulate to the American people, I may not be here to see what the future is going to look like in the next 20 years, but I can help be a part of the process to guide the nation to that future. That can be a very, very powerful moment for the president. I think that would resonate deeply with a lot of independent voters and a lot of moderate Republicans.
Yeah, we'll see what it looks like. Obviously, they'll be watching closely tonight. One of the earliest debates we've also ever seen. Yeah. That's remarkable in and of itself. Everyone stand by, because we are counting down to this presidential debate here on CNN. President Biden has arrived here in Atlanta. We are waiting for former President Donald Trump and his plane to touch down any moment. We'll be tracking all of this live. And also the key issues that Biden and Trump are going to try to capitalize on. They each have different priorities that they want to make sure voters hear them talk about on that stage that you're seeing right here. We'll talk about that after a quick break.
Any moment now, we're expecting Donald Trump to arrive at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport for tonight's main event. President Biden has already landed. CNN's Kristen Holmes is joining us right now. Kristen, this is a big moment just ahead of tonight's debate. Set the scene from where you are.
That's right, Wolf. So what we expect from Donald Trump is he's going to land at the airport. He'll be greeted by supporters, and then he'll come straight here to the debate site where his team has a room set up. That's where he's going to stay until the debate, get acclimated with the setup, with the podiums, with this area, and also have some time to talk to his senior advisors and prepare right ahead of that debate. Now, as we have been reporting, Donald Trump has been spending the last several days in Mar-a-Lago. He is expected to have a rally tomorrow in Virginia, but what he has been focused on is conversations. That is how Donald Trump has done his debate prep. While his team has said they don't use the word preparation when it comes to Donald Trump, it is very clear that they are taking this debate very seriously. Jason Miller, one of Donald Trump's closest allies, has been running point on this debate preparation, and that means setting up, arranging, and sitting in on various policy sessions, from everything from how to answer questions on abortion to how to answer questions on democracy, particularly Donald Trump's role in January 6th, what he has said since then, including what he has said about pardoning individuals who were involved in the insurrection on that day. Now, we've also learned from these senior advisors that they have drilled down to Donald Trump that the most important thing that he can do is focus on key issues for voters. They've identified those issues, particularly through polling, as the economy, particularly inflation, as immigration, as crime rates. These are things they think that will resonate with voters, and Donald Trump has a message that he wants to send, and that message is, were you better off under my administration, particularly when it comes to the economy, or are you better off now? And that really goes to the heart of what we know tonight to be a historic moment, because we have never before seen a former U.S. president on the stage with a current U.S. president. And both of these teams are seeking to contrast the administrations that they have already had, their records that they believe that they have already proven. Now, of course, the outlying factor here is who Donald Trump is at his core. We know that President Biden is planning attacks on Donald Trump, and the question is whether or not Trump reciprocates those. We talk about what we see at these rallies when he has these crowds of supporters. He really doubles down on nasty personal attacks against not only Biden but his family. Will we see that tonight? I've spoken to a number of allies and donors in particular who say they don't want to see that. They don't want this to get into mudslinging. They think that Donald Trump will actually be able to appeal to the voters he needs to appeal to by talking about messaging. When we talk about those voters he needs to appeal to, you're talking about the number of voters in the middle who are likely to determine this election. That's what they want to see from Donald Trump when he takes the stage tonight.
We'll see what happens. Kristen Holmes reporting for us. Kristen will be checking back with you frequently to be sure. Any moment now, we expect Donald Trump's plane to be wheels down here in Atlanta. We're going to bring that to you. Plus, the messages we're hearing right now from close supporters of President Biden and former President Trump in the hours before tonight's debate. That's also coming up.
You are looking live right now as Donald Trump's plane has just landed here in Atlanta, Georgia. There it is, taxiing down the runway. That comes after we saw President Biden land not too long ago. He's waiting at a nearby hotel until he makes his way to the debate hall, where he is going to be meeting with, of course, his top advisors as he's preparing for this debate. He's been at Camp David for several days. Former President Donald Trump has also been somewhere you don't typically find him this time of year, at his Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach, Florida. Normally, he's at his New Jersey club, as reporters who covered him know well during the summer months, but he has been there because it was a more seclusionary space for him to be thinking about debate prep. He wasn't around everyone at lunches and dinners like he typically is at his clubs. It does show how differently the two of them, Shermichael, have prepared for this moment and how they've been approaching it, where, you know, with Joe Biden, with President Biden, they used an airplane hangar at Camp David, a movie theater. They set up with lights and outfitted it to look similar to what the debate stage will look like tonight, to really get him prepped for this. Obviously, that's how President Biden is known to prep intensively. Donald Trump takes a different tactic. He's still been doing debate prep. It hasn't been that informal based on what we've been hearing from his aides and allies. But it will maybe show up on the debate stage tonight, how they've prepped for the mics, for the no audience, two things that neither of them have ever done before.
I mean, look, depending on the questions, it will show whether or not a candidate has a command of the issues. When I worked for Mitt Romney, it was a very thorough debate process. Newt Gingrich, a very thorough debate process. But these were two men who were interested in the nuances of policy. President Trump, I don't think, is one who's interested in the nuances of policies, and that will show when there are questions about China, when there are nuanced questions about Russia. I expect President Biden to probably do better on some of those issues. When there are more nuanced questions about monetary theories, if Biden decides to get into that about the economy, most voters may not care, but what it showcases people watching, this is someone who I can trust to do the job, whether I agree with them on everything or not. And I think considering how close this election is going to be, Jonah keeps bringing up the very slim folks in the middle, I think those people are more astute. They're typically more educated. They do care about someone who is more nuanced and has a command of those critical issues, because they want to be able to trust that you can lead the country forward in a very critical time.
And it's doing it without notes. And I think we haven't talked about that yet, but there has been a lot of criticism for Joe Biden for always having notes and needing something to rely on because he can't remember. Tonight is a test. He will have 90 minutes where he will talk to the American people, where he will have to go from his memory about the issues. And if he gets nuanced and can really show a command, as you say, of the issues, that can help quell some of the concern that these voters have about Joe Biden's age.
That's a great point. And also, Donald Trump himself uses a prompter when he's on the debate stage.
Well, sometimes.
He does go off prompter, which maybe some of his aides would like for him to not. There will be obviously no prompter for those candidates tonight. And that is a really big impact on this, that this is just the candidates and themselves and what they've rehearsed and been prepared to do, but no other assistance. And also during the two commercial breaks, the only two breaks that they'll have this whole 90-minute stretch, Bakari, none of their advisors can come up and talk to them and say, you're doing a great job, or you need to fix this. It's just them with their thoughts.
Yeah, and I think the preparation is key. And I do know for a fact, just talking to my friends around Biden world, how they've changed, scheduling, et cetera, because of the time of day the debate is, and how he's preparing for this intently, how he prepares for the day of being president. And I think one of the things we're going to go back to is the presentation, because when you're talking policy and you have someone give an answer that, although you may disagree with, you can also juxtapose that against somebody who's espousing utter BS, right? And that may be the split screen image. Like, I don't necessarily agree with Donald Trump in this position. Joe Biden in this position. But I don't know what Donald Trump is even talking about. For me, I know you've been watching debates. I spent a lot of time in the old world of the 44th president of the United States. And I remind people like our colleague David Axelrod how they got their behind kicked by Mitt Romney in the first debate. It was clinical. It was surgical, the way that Mitt Romney thoroughly destroyed one of the smartest men I knew, because Mitt Romney was more prepared for him, and Mitt Romney actually put that preparation forward. Somebody who we thought Barack Obama could just go on stage and be God's gift to debate got smacked around. He didn't do it the second time. He performed better. And so I do think this preparation is going to really matter in this debate. We shall see if Donald Trump is taking this serious or not.
Yes. Yeah, both can be rusty for this. And, of course, another thing, Wolf, that we're watching as Donald Trump's plane has just pulled up and landed here in Atlanta is who gets off the plane with him. We do know the First Lady, Joe Biden, will be here accompanying her husband. She is expected to join him later on stage at the end of the debate. Another thing we're watching is to see which family members are accompanying Donald Trump on this trip here tonight for this historic debate, Wolf.
Well, we know one family member who won't be accompanying Donald Trump tonight. We're going to talk with her in just a moment. This, on the cusp of tonight's debate, there's a new surrogate right now, get this, for the Biden campaign, an actual member of the Trump family. And she's joining us right now, Donald Trump's niece and frequent critic of her uncle, Mary Trump. Mary, thanks very much for joining us. You say you've witnessed your uncle's, quote, and I'm quoting you now, narcissism and cruelty your entire life. Why are you coming out for Biden right now, and why did you feel it was actually so important to say all this right before this debate tonight and show up actually here in Atlanta?
Well, first of all, Wolf, thank you so much for having me. And I just want to make it clear, I have always been a huge supporter of President Biden. And I've been saying for a long time, I believe that this is the most important election, certainly of my lifetime. And I think this is a perfect moment for me to come out publicly, not just with my support of President Biden, but to send a very clear message to the American people that we could not make a more egregious mistake than letting Donald Trump, again, anywhere near the levers of power.
And by the way, Mary, we're showing a live picture of your uncle's plane, which just landed here at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. We expect him to be walking off that plane momentarily. We'll show our viewers that when that happens. We've heard, as you probably have heard as well, supposedly about a more subdued Donald Trump showing up to tonight's debate. Given what you know about your uncle, can he keep that up for 90 minutes?
Absolutely not. I think some of the conditions of the debate that his team agreed to will make the situation even worse for him. Having his mic muted, not having an audience, all of those play to his weaknesses. And I think as the debate continues, especially as President Biden shows up completely prepared to run circles around a much inferior candidate, Donald will not be able to contain himself for that long.
We're still trying to confirm where Donald Trump's immediate family will be tonight, Mary. We're wondering about Melania, Ivanka, Jared Kushner's son-in-law. If any of them show up, what does that say to you? Do you think they, first of all, will show up?
I have no inside knowledge of that, but I think we've seen over the last many months that they don't seem interested in supporting Donald in any active public way. That doesn't mean they won't show up, and if they do, I honestly don't think it means much. All of his relationships are transactional, and it would simply mean that they are keeping all of their options open. So I don't make much of it at all either way.
Do you plan to campaign with President Biden in the days, weeks, and months ahead? And what can we expect from you over this coming period?
I am available to help the Biden campaign in any way I can. I would be honored to be of service to them in any capacity. But outside of that, I'll continue to do what I've been doing since before the 2020 election, to speak out against Donald. He is an authoritarian wannabe. He would be terrible for the future of this country and its citizens, as he's proven time and time again. And President Biden is the man for our time, and I will do everything I can to make sure as many people as possible support him as much as I do.
Mary Trump, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
All right, Caitlin, we're showing our viewers, as you well know, these live pictures over at the Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport. We expect Donald Trump to be walking down those stairs momentarily. This is a huge deal that's coming up at this debate tonight, and it potentially could set the stage for an eventual outcome of the actual election. It's going to be watched by tens of millions of Americans. Indeed, people all over the world will be watching as well, Caitlin.
Yeah, Wolf, it's more eyeballs than either of these candidates have gotten, probably in this entire campaign season, as they've both been battling it out with relatively stable polling, as we've seen. Obviously, one thing that's different about this debate that we have emphasized is there is no audience here. So you will not see the typical, huge line of surrogates and allies that are seated in the audience for these candidates, but they will have some that they are bringing with them. They will be here in the spin room after the debate to talk about their respective candidates' performance. And so that's one thing I'm watching as we see former President Trump in moments come down these stairs, is who is accompanying him on this trip. Are members of his family with him? We obviously know members of his campaign that have been down with him at his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida are going to be there with him, and they are indeed on the plane with him. They've been rehearsing and practicing as they've made their way here to Atlanta, Georgia. The other thing, Wolf, of course, is the second contest that's happening tonight is the Veep Stakes. That is still very much playing out. We heard a few days ago Donald Trump say he does believe likely the person he is going to be on the ticket, the person he's going to pick to be on the ticket with him will be accompanying him on this trip. They'll be here in the spin room. We know Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. Three names that have been mentioned repeatedly in the last several days are expected to be here to spin on Donald Trump's behalf. No word yet of if he's actually selected one of them to be his running mate, though, Wolf. So all of this is, obviously we'll be watching the main show, the two of them on stage tonight, but all of this is also a key part of the campaign as well.
I want to, Caitlin, you've covered Trump now for the past several years, and you've watched him closely. Were you surprised that his niece, Mary Trump, has now not only endorsed Biden, but has actually shown up here at this debate to speak out so aggressively in favor of Biden's election?
And Wolf, I remember when Mary Trump first came public with her criticism of her uncle. You can hear a crowd at the airport right now chanting as Donald Trump is about to get off his plane, I should note. But Mary Trump came out and she eviscerated Trump. She was everywhere. She was on cable news. She was doing interviews. And those were questions we posed to Donald Trump when he was in the White House as President Trump, to his aides, because it was remarkable to see family come out and be so heavily critical of him. Obviously, Mary Trump has continued to do so. She has written books about it, as have other people in his orbit, and talked about this. And I do think that's another part of this that could come up tonight, is when you see Donald Trump and his aides descend these stairs, he also has a slew of former advisors, cabinet officials. His own vice president who served with him, Mike Pence, ran against him for the GOP nomination and have criticized him and said he should not be back inside the White House. That's another thing we could see President Biden bring up on the debate stage tonight, Wolf, because he's used it in campaign ads against Donald Trump, those who around him and are closest to him. And as you just interviewed Mary Wolf there in that fascinating moment, that have now since criticized him and said he shouldn't be back in the White House.
I'm wondering, Caitlin, give me your thoughts. When he walks down these stairs, he has now landed. He's at the Atlanta airport. He's going to walk down. A small crowd of Trump supporters, as you know, has gathered at the airport on the tarmac over there. Do you think the former president is actually going to go over and talk to these people a little bit? Do you think he's going to make a statement to the media which are there, or you think he's just going to get into the car and drive off?
Yeah, we may see some retail politics, Wolf. I mean, we saw that when President Biden landed here earlier. He made an unexpected pit stop. He greeted some supporters of his before then making his way over to the hotel where, of course, he was waiting and hanging out until he makes his way over here to the debate hall. Donald Trump often, when he gets off of his plane, whether it's at a rally or even when he was inside the White House and he was pulling up at White House events, and there would be a crowd gathered. They greet local officials typically when they get off the plane, and then they go and greet their supporters. One thing I should note, Wolf, is you saw the current mayor of Atlanta and the previous mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, who is now working as a surrogate for the Biden campaign, greeting President Biden when he got off Air Force One. The governor here, Governor Brian Kemp, that you just interviewed in the last hour, Wolf, is not expected to be there greeting former President Trump. They haven't spoken in quite some time ever since they had an incredibly contentious relationship and a major fracture when Kemp didn't do what Trump wanted him to do to try to help overturn the election results here in the state of Georgia. So that's another factor as you're looking at Trump arriving here in Georgia. You know, it was just a little over a year ago that Donald Trump was here when he was indicted in the Georgia election interference case, had his mugshot taken. That's about 3 miles from where I'm sitting right now. We were here covering it all. So there are just so many layers to this arrival here, Wolf, to seeing Donald Trump as he is preparing to come here to debate Joe Biden on stage in just a few hours from now.
Caitlin, I want you to stand by. I want to bring in right now one of Donald Trump's vice presidential contenders, a Republican congressman from Florida, Byron Donalds. Thanks so much, Congressman, for joining us. I know you've arrived. You support Trump big time. What does a win for him look like tonight?
Well, Wolf, it's good to be with you. I will tell you, success tonight is creating that direct contrast between the terrible agenda of Joe Biden and a successful agenda when Donald Trump was president of the United States. You have two clear contrasts in the way this country should go. That would be success tonight.
We're seeing the former president getting off the plane right now. He's about to walk down those stairs, but he's waving to a group of supporters who have gathered there on the tarmac. I'm curious to see if he's actually going to go over there and speak with them, shake some hands, talk to the media a little bit. So hold on one second as we watch this unfold, Congressman. We'll discuss this and a lot more in just a moment. But let's see what he does right now as he's getting down these stairs. And let's see if he walks over and sees some of these supporters or goes right to the car, to the limo, and heads off to the debate. He's going to the car. He's not going to go to the supporters. He's got his van right there. So, Congressman, what do you think? What are your expectations for tonight?
I think Donald Trump's going to be very clear. He's going to be very direct to the American people about what his agenda means in their lives on an individual basis, what it means for our country overall, what it means for our standing in the world. And you don't have to look very far to look at the stark contrast when looking at what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have done with the United States. Our standing around the world has fallen. There are conflicts across the globe. Inflation has ravaged the purchasing power of so many Americans, especially working families and seniors on fixed incomes. And then you look at our border. The drug cartels have operational control over our southern border, trafficking millions and millions of people and deadly fentanyl into the streets of America. The picture could not be starker. Donald Trump has the prescription to save our country.
You know, as you know, Congressman, President Biden has argued that Trump is only working for himself, not working for Americans. If Trump lists his grievances, including about his criminal trials, will he prove Biden right tonight?
Well, actually, if anybody's going to be bringing that stuff up, Wolf, it's going to be Joe Biden, because he has nothing else to talk about. He's got nothing to run on except what he wants to bring up in terms of slights against President Trump. If you've watched the president on the campaign trail, he's been focused on the American people. Of course, he brings up what happened in Lower Manhattan. His constitutional rights were violated in that courtroom. That's why everybody believes that case is going to be overturned. But at the end of the day, he has been laser focused on the American people. It's Joe Biden that wants to go back 4 years and talk about January 6th. It's Joe Biden who wants to talk about these threats to democracy, which, frankly, Joe Biden is the one that's bringing to our country.
We see Trump's vehicle leaving the airport now, driving away from the plane, from the tarmac, and heading to where I am right now, here at the site of the presidential debate tonight. He's going to be heading over here very soon for this major debate tonight. As you know, Congressman, This week, Trump asked some of his supporters if he should be nasty or nice during the course of this debate. What do you think? What advice would you give him? Should he be nasty or should he be nice?
Wolf, I'll tell you, I think he's going to be direct. He's going to present leadership. And when the time comes where he's going to have to push back, he's going to push back. And if the time comes back where he needs to push back hard, he's going to do that too. This is not about naughty or nice. We're not talking about Christmas presents here. We're talking about leadership for the American people. He's going to demonstrate that mantle of leadership. That's what you're going to see tonight from Donald Trump.
One quick final question. Do you want to be his running mate?
Of course, who wouldn't? Listen, I'm in it to make sure, number one, we win this election, but number two, we save our country. We got the best country in the world. Obviously, we have our own problems, but we are the best thing going today. It is a shame what's happening to America right now. We can do better, and I'll tell you this, whether it's me or anybody on that list, it'll be a significant upgrade over Kamala Harris.
Republican Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And let me bring in our panel that's here with me in Atlanta. And Jamie, let's talk a little bit about this historic night right now. What should we be looking for? What are you going to be looking for once this debate actually gets underway?
I think it's the things we don't know, the surprises. Are they going to shake hands when these two men come together? What will the energy be in the room? We've heard, we know that the mics will be muted. That's not so good for Donald Trump because he likes to interrupt. But there are other ways to interrupt. I think we all remember when he debated Hillary Clinton and they were sitting on two stools and he started walking back and forth. So you don't need your voice. And Donald Trump is a showman. He will figure out how to get attention.
You think they'll shake hands?
I do think they'll shake hands. I do.
Let's see.
I mean, I think also it's good just to take a step back here, Wolf. There are going to be so many voters tonight who have been tuned out of politics, have really not been paying attention to anything that has happened in the last 4 years, may have their impression about what Joe Biden has done in office, not by basically what he said, but maybe by something a friend has said, or may have not been paying attention to anything that Trump has done over the past 4 years. They may have forgotten what the Trump presidency is like. Those voters, often called in political terms low information voters, are going to be key targets, of course, for Trump and Biden. Can Trump appear presidential, alleviate the concerns of some of those voters who are concerned about his character, this bombast, things they didn't like? And for Biden, concerns about his age, his ability to do the job. Can he show them that he can stand there for 90 minutes and deliver a convincing argument about his vision for the future? That is going to be the key test for both of them, because there are going to be so many new voters who are tuning in tonight who will be weighing in for looking at him for the first time, essentially.
And he's got real constituency work to do. Biden does. He's here in Georgia. This is a state that he won by about 12,000 votes. In 2020, it's an electorate that could be something like 30% African American. You saw him there on the tarmac when he arrived. Sort of the royalty of the black political class in Atlanta. And so he's got to figure out how to bring those voters back in higher numbers to the Democratic fold. Also, young voters, Latino voters, and also suburban women voters. Georgia is really, I think, a real test case for him. Can he do that kind of work here tonight? And I think, it's obviously what Trump has to do, too. He's got some constituency work to do, too, reaching across the aisle, trying to get some of those independent voters and sort of Nikki Haley voters who are disaffected with him, primarily on grounds around, his morality and his character and his temperament. How does he do that tonight?
And I think you can actually pull out Manu's point even further. It's not just low information voters, Wolf, or low propensity voters. I think it's voters generally, right? People have been very tuned out. People have been very apathetic. There are a lot of reasons why it has been a dramatic and really difficult last 3, 4, 5 years for a lot of people who aren't excited, at least according to polling, by a significant margin, about the candidates they have and about a rematch. This is the moment. Tens of millions of people, whether they want it to or not, are going to be watching tonight because they want to know. And there's a very real possibility, particularly there's a second debate scheduled. We don't know necessarily whether or not it's going to happen. There's a lot of kind of chatter on both sides that this may be it. This may be kind of the last, final, best moment for both of these candidates to demonstrate not just try and get away from perceptions that they believe are inaccurate, but also they have dramatically divergent policy positions and what they believe the next 4 years should look like. This is an opportunity for both of them tonight, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for voters to see these individuals, not clips of them, not snippets of them, not what they remember from 4 or 6 years ago, to see what they want to do.
You know, Jamie, it was noticeable that when Trump got off the plane and walked down those stairs, he walked down by himself. I didn't see Melania or any other family member walking down. And when he got into that vehicle, he got into that vehicle by himself.
Yeah, we've seen no family thus far. We have no reason to believe that Melania is going to be coming. He did something else when he walked down the stairs. We're replaying it now. He's looking down at those stairs very carefully
closely,
when he
yes.
walks. He stops, he does the fist thing, but then he's back watching every single one of those steps. We have two old men here, not just one. We've talked a lot about Joe Biden being old. Donald Trump is too. I'm hearing, I reached out, I think, to about 20 or 25 sources, Republicans and Democrats, to ask them what they thought about tonight, particularly Biden sources. They are worried. They want, quote, a knockout punch. They want Biden to trigger Trump, to get under his skin, and they want him to talk about democracy in peril, that he's a convicted felon, twice impeached, January 6th. One thing I heard from both sides, they're both nervous about the debates. I'm just going to read one last thing. One source sent me this. Remember Dan Rather's famous quotes, quote, "I feel more nervous than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs." But everybody I texted, they're all watching.
Look, so much of it is going to be stylistically how he responds, because Biden, Trump was going to lay out a number of attacks against Joe Biden, of course. Will Biden just go through a laundry list of things, respond to each charge? That is not actually what Democrats thought. That's not what operatives say he should do. He should respond maybe at one thing and then turn an attack back against Donald Trump. That is a much more effective debate strategy. But what you see so many times, and especially incumbent presidents, when they come in, they get very defensive right away, and they'll go back and lay out a laundry list of their accomplishments. And that is not necessarily what's going to create a debate moment, because those moments oftentimes define the perception of the debate.
I keep saying, let's not forget, tens and tens of millions of Americans will be watching this debate. Many of them are presumably undecided. We'll see if they make up their minds on how it goes. Everybody stand by. We're just over 3 hours from the start of tonight's CNN presidential debate. President Biden and former President Trump are now both here in Atlanta. You saw Trump arrive just moments ago. We're back with more of our special coverage right after this.
Tonight, as Donald Trump is battling with President Biden on the debate stage, another battle is going to be unfolding right outside, the battle that is to be Donald Trump's running mate. His top vice presidential contenders, like Senators J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, also North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, they are among several potential picks who are going to be here in Atlanta to show support for him. My panel is back with me. And Bakari, it is fascinating to see one debate playing out, one contest, and then another one that is going to be playing out right here in the spin room after. And I think the question is, if you are seeking to be Donald Trump's vice president, you know, how do you? I didn't even get the question out yet. How do you distinguish yourself after a debate? Obviously, television's his favorite medium.
You know, I think that it requires a certain level of being a sycophant that I don't think I'm capable of doing. It requires you setting aside most of what you've achieved or attempted to do, that lane you tried to cut out for yourself. I think the best example of that is probably somebody like Tim Scott, who is a friend of mine and who has somewhat changed who we knew him to be throughout this process. But, you know, and it's also hard because usually when you're attempting to get a job such as this, you want to at least have some relationship and know what that person is thinking. When Kamala Harris went through the process, Gretchen Whitmer went through the process, and I can't remember who the third possible candidate was. Kamala Harris literally knew Joe Biden, knew his thought process, came up with him, knew his son, Beau. And so it was those relationships that mattered. I personally don't think, and I may be wrong, but if I were betting, I would say that Donald Trump's not going to pick any of them. I think that it's going to be a wild card. I think Donald Trump picks somebody like Ben Carson, who he has an amazing relationship with. I think he picks somebody like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, which is also somewhat of a wild card. And I think that if he was serious about winning, he'd pick Nikki Haley. The one who terrifies most Democrats, though, is Marco Rubio.
Well, and obviously fundraising is going to be a huge part of whoever it is he picks. Axios is reporting about the RNC holding a fundraiser and a watch party. The tickets are going for $10,000 per couple, $25,000 for a seat at a table with a Trump surrogate, and all that's playing out as he's also very interested in who is going to boost his ticket, maybe not with voters, but certainly at least when it comes to fundraising.
I mean, I look at this in two ways, Caitlin. I think you need someone who can boost Donald Trump in the eyes of some swing voters who may be skeptical of him, maybe they're not comfortable voting for him, but with the right person who's moderate, the right temperament, they could say, okay, I'll vote for him. I think that's why he chose Mike Pence, not only because of the evangelicals, but Pence did, for a lot of conservatives, bring a level of calm to Trump's chaos. With that said, I do think you also want someone who can raise a lot of money. And donors who don't like Trump, who are skeptical of Trump, who are slow to come on board, would probably be more comfortable with someone like a Rubio, with someone like a Dr. Carson. And so I think Trump has to be careful with whomever he chooses.
I mean, you mentioned Mike Pence. It is notable. What happened to Mike Pence, which we're all going to gloss over at the end of that, it doesn't seem to give any of these candidates pause. I've spoken with at least Senator J.D. Vance about that, and he downplayed what happened to Mike Pence on January 6th.
Well, and the Mike Pence experience has made Donald Trump say that loyalty is one of the most important things to him. And that's why I think when you're looking at the boxes that these folks have to check in the great apprentice vice presidential edition that we're going to watch unfold, loyalty, the ability to be a fighter, and somebody who looks good on TV, somebody who fills the role, who looks the part. I think that's who he's going to be looking for. So that could mean somebody like a Doug Burgum, who comes to the table with a great deal of business success. We know Donald Trump thinks that that's very important. The state of North Dakota has actually been doing great. He has an interesting record to run on there. He would be a steadying hand. In addition to the fact that, he's kind of this alternate universe Mitt Romney type character. Now, but does that hurt him, though? Is he going to be as aggressive out there as somebody like a J.D. Vance or an Elise Stefanik, who has been known for going on TV and being more of that kind of pit bull in his corner?
A difficult role to fill.
Crazy is that, and none of that was it that they could be the president of the United States. Donald Trump is 78 years old, and whoever is his presidential pick could become president, and that's not a part of the conversation, which is, I think, hypocritical in the Republican Party.
We are getting even closer. We got to stand by, take a quick break. I do want to hear everyone's thoughts on the Veep stakes, as we will see them here behind us in this room, as we are getting even closer to the presidential debate tonight. Up next, the messages that we are hearing from both campaigns, those final messages well ahead of the face-off.
This is debate night in America. Right now, we're closing in on the first ever face-off between a current and former president of the United States. Joe Biden and Donald Trump now here in Atlanta after touching down just a short time ago as they ready themselves for a truly historic CNN presidential debate. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Atlanta.
Candidates will find themselves. Preparations are now underway for the earliest general election debate that we've ever seen in U.S. history. It's a rare chance for both candidates to get to speak directly to voters and their concerns, and also maybe land some attacks that could reset or at least shake up this race that has been relatively stable so far. This hour, we are going to take you inside the campaigns as we are counting down to this unprecedented event. You are watching Debate Night here in America.
First up this hour, President Biden's plans to take on former President Trump tonight on the debate stage. CNN's MJ Lee is gathering some new information for us right now. What are you learning, MJ?
Well, President Biden is here in Atlanta. We are waiting for him to make his way over here to the CNN studios. We've been talking so much over the last week about the debate preparations at Camp David, but we should also talk a little bit about just how closely the Biden team over the last few days has been watching the Trump team and everything that they have been saying about their own preparations. They've certainly taken note of the fact that the former president and allies of his have been talking about how little time that he has actually actually spending on debate prep, how there haven't even been formal debate prep sessions. And advisors have told us that they basically don't buy that argument, that they actually think that the former president has been doing a lot more debate prep than he has been letting on, and that this could end up resulting in the president being more disciplined and more on message than some people might actually expect. They're also very keenly aware of the abrupt shift in tone that we have seen from President Trump and others close to him about the expectation setting for President Biden. You know, for months, the Trump team has been attacking President Biden for being physically not all there, mentally not all there. Can he even stand on the debate stage for 90 minutes? And they are aware, I think, the Biden team, that in some ways the Trump team has helped to lower the bar for him. But of course, they are very much hoping tonight that all of the intensive debate preparations will really pay off and that he will do more than just clear the bar.
And MJ, we heard directly from the First Lady earlier this afternoon. What did she say about tonight's debate?
Yeah, that's right, Wolf. I mean, she will, of course, be the biggest cheerleader for President Biden tonight, and she will be one of the family members that will be joining him at the debate. We heard her earlier basically asking Americans and asking viewers to, yes, pay attention to the policy, pay attention to the substance, but also pay attention to the person that her husband is. Take a listen.
I want you tonight, when you see them both debating, I want you to hear Joe's words. But most of all, I want you to listen to his heart. Yes. Because what you're going to hear is how much Joe cares about Americans.
And we know, Wolf, that the Biden team preparations at Camp David have included getting the president ready for potential attacks and insults against members of the president's family. Of course, I should remind everyone that still very fresh for the Biden family is the news from earlier this month that the president's son, Hunter Biden, was convicted on 3 felony gun charges. Certainly, all of this just gets to the broader point that the Biden team has been trying to prepare for anything and everything that could be thrown the president's way tonight.
We'll see if Trump throws any of that his way. We'll be watching very closely. MJ Lee, thank you very much. I also want to check in with CNN's Kristen Holmes right now. She's covering the Trump campaign for us. Kristen, how is the former president preparing with less than, 3 hours to go until this debate?
Well, Donald Trump just landed in Atlanta. He and his team, he was surrounded by some of his top advisors, Chris LaCivita, Susie Wiles, Jason Miller, who has been running point on the debate. They headed into the motorcade, and they should be here at the debate site any minute. Now, in terms of what they are doing to prepare, we are told they're going directly into the room that is designated for Trump and his team. They'll continue to watch the debate coverage, the lead up, and they will maintain conversations about what to expect later tonight. According to one aide, it is now all on the former president's shoulders. There's not much else that they believe that they can do to drill into him ahead of this debate. Of course, as we know from these senior advisors, they have spent an enormous amount of time focusing on things like immigration, like crime, like the economy, and particularly inflation. They are hoping that Donald Trump will use that messaging when he takes the stage. And it was interesting to hear MJ talking there about Jill and what a supporter and cheerleader that she has been for President Joe Biden. Notably, as he departed his plane that he'd flown up on from Florida, there was one person missing, Melania Trump, the former First Lady. Now, it's not that surprising when you think about the fact that in the entire time that Donald Trump has been running for president, which he announced back in 2022, that she has only appeared at one single campaign event, and that was the launch event at her Mar-a-Lago home. However, this is a significant moment. If you talk to anyone around former President Donald Trump, they will tell you that he understands how significant this moment and how the gravity of the time that we are in. So interesting, of course, to see the contrast between Jill Biden and Melania Trump.
Kristen Holmes reporting for us. Kristen, thank you very much. Joining us now, Ambassador Susan Rice, a former domestic policy advisor for President Biden. She also served as national security advisor under President Obama. She was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations as well. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. As you probably have heard, Trump will likely argue tonight that under President Biden, 2 wars broke out in Ukraine, as well as Israel and Hamas and Gaza. And the border, the U.S. border with Mexico, is a mess. That's what we will hear, presumably, from former President Trump. How do you think President Biden can best counter those arguments?
Well, good to be with you, Wolf. President Biden will make the broad case that America's standing in the world is much stronger than it's been in a long time, and certainly much stronger than it was under Donald Trump. The reality is that NATO is expanded. We have 2 additional countries. We have more cohesion and strength in our alliances, both in Europe and in Asia, than ever before. And the United States is back, and you hear our allies every day say how grateful they are to have President Biden as their partner. Yes, the world is a dangerous place. Much of that is long-standing, but you want, when the world is a dangerous place, somebody who is steady, somebody who's committed to the United States and its interests rather than one's personal interests, rather than somebody who is erratic, who embraces dictators, who gives Vladimir Putin the sort of praise and encouragement to go and do what the hell he wants to NATO countries. We need strong American leadership, and that's what Joe Biden has provided, and that's what he's going to continue to provide when he's reelected.
As you know, Ambassador Rice, some younger Democrats in critical swing battleground states like Michigan, for example, have been very vocal about their disagreement with President Biden over his support for Israel in the war against Hamas in Gaza. Should President Biden attempt to win back their votes tonight, and if so, how?
Well, President Biden is going to do what he has been doing, which is to make it clear that across the board, whether you're talking about foreign policy or domestic policy, he's fighting for American interests and for the interests of working families. He is committed to doing all he can to lower costs for American families, and we see great progress in healthcare costs coming down and prescription drug costs coming down. He's working to preserve the freedoms that Americans hold dear, from our voting rights to the ability of women to control what happens to their own bodies. And on the international stage, yes, he's been clear that we will stand with our ally Israel, but he's also been clear that it is vitally important that this war come to an end, that it is time for a ceasefire, that there be adequate and much increased humanitarian assistance, the return of the hostages, and that the three-phase plan that the president laid out, that the Israelis proposed to Hamas, needs to be the basis moving forward. And it's now incumbent upon Hamas to accept that plan and the Israelis to embrace what they have committed to and put forward on the table. That is what is essential, Wolf, if we're to see this horrific war come to an end, Hamas degraded and defeated as it must be, and the Palestinian people having the opportunity to chart a future that they deserve as well.
As you know, Ambassador Rice, Trump has often said, and he says it all the time, that he had a better relationship with some of the dictators out there, such as Vladimir Putin or Kim Jong-un, and that they would listen to him if he were president once again. What should President Biden's response to that argument? I suspect we will hear that from Trump later tonight. What should Biden's response be?
Well, if you want to be buddies with Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, that is not the way to serve American interests. Vladimir Putin has indicated and demonstrated time and time again that his ambition is to not just take Ukraine, and as he tried to take Georgia years ago, and not just to take Crimea, but to take all of Ukraine and then move into Europe and NATO territory. And the Western alliance is united and clear that we cannot allow that to happen. We cannot coddle Putin. We cannot compromise with Putin. We cannot give Putin the green light that Donald Trump has given him to do whatever the hell he wants with NATO. That is reckless and dangerous, and it's characteristic of the kinds of erratic leadership that we've seen so much out of Donald Trump that we just cannot afford.
Ambassador Susan Rice, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Wolf.
And up next, how the battle over abortion in America could play a big role, potentially, in tonight's debate. Stay with us.
Tonight's debate is coming just as the Supreme Court today voted to allow emergency abortions in Idaho for now when a pregnant patient's health is at serious risk. Of course, we have looked at that abortion ban there. Idaho has one of the nation's strictest abortion bans in the United States. This ruling, though, is temporary. It leaves a lot of unanswered questions as the case is now going to go back and work its way through the lower courts. Here to talk about all of this and the dynamics that decision has on the debate stage tonight is Ralph Reed, who is the chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, where we just saw former President Trump speaking over the weekend. And it's great to have you because I just, from your perspective, we've been talking from the political aspect of what voters want to see, what they want to see. When it comes to evangelicals and seeing Donald Trump on that debate stage tonight, do you want to see him call for a national abortion ban? What are you hoping he says about that on stage?
Well, we support both federal and state protection for the innocent unborn. I mean, our position is that an unborn child is a member of the human family, and it has a right to life that cannot and should not be infringed. We also think, Caitlin, and this is in the Republican Party platform and has been for over 40 years, that an unborn child is protected under the 14th Amendment's guarantee that no person can be denied or infringed life or liberty without due process of law. That's our position. It's in the party platform. Now, we've had the Dobbs decision 2 years ago, almost, well, this week.
This week.
So that's changed everything, all right? And what the president has said, meaning Trump, what President Trump has said is it was the liberals who federalized this. Roe federalized this. For most of American history, it was decided by the states. And by the Dobbs decision, states now have a right to do that again. And that's his position. I have no problem with that position because I think the reality is, whether you're pro-choice or you're pro-life, that's where the action is. The pro-choice side is qualifying these initiatives and referendums and trying to get their way. We are passing pro-life bills. We've done it in 24 states. We're going to keep going. Caitlin, it's called democracy. That's what democracy looks like.
Saying the voters in each state should make a decision. But we've seen how Democrats have talked about this, and President Biden himself has talked about it a lot. And they've said if Donald Trump is reelected, he will sign a federal abortion ban into law because people who support him want to see that. But is that something that you believe is something he should call for on the debate stage?
Well, it's something that we clearly support. I mean, as I've said,
you would like to see him.
We'd like to see protection of the unborn at the federal level and the state level, and we don't want to see states like California, Illinois, New York pass laws, and this is Joe Biden's position. Let's be clear about this. He supports a federal bill that would allow abortion on demand for any reason at any stage of pregnancy, including the 8th or 9th month, including after the child can feel pain, including after the child can survive outside the womb. Now, there was a time, Caitlin, when Democrats called that infanticide. People like Daniel Patrick Moynihan called it infanticide. He also wants to use tax dollars to pay for those abortions under Medicaid. So his position is the radical and extreme position.
I know you don't agree with him at all. I don't expect you to.
Right.
But I will note that 8 and 9 month abortions are incredibly rare. I mean, we just spoke to Kate Cox about this, who had to leave Texas to go get an abortion. And she wanted to grow her family. She talked about how painful it actually was for her to have an abortion when she did, but she had a fetal anomaly that was going to have her baby survive maybe a week after it was born. And so when you look at this, and we talk about the blowback politically for some Republicans and certain ballot measures that have been on the ballot after Roe versus Wade was overturned, that's been a difficult line for former President Trump to walk and how he talks about that, because there are some states, my home state of Alabama, that don't have a lot of exceptions. Some of them have no exceptions whatsoever. Some don't have it for incest, only for the life of the mother.
Right.
Politically, though, aren't you worried there's going to be blowback for a ticket for a Republican candidate this fall because of those?
No, I'm really not, because the president has made it abundantly clear he takes the same position Ronald Reagan took, which is the 3 exceptions of rape, incest, and life of the mother.
But what about states that don't have those? He says it should be up to the states. How do you square that?
Well, he has his position, but he also said this is what democracy looks like. And I'm not worried about the initiatives and referendums, and I'll tell you why. You go back, Caitlin, and look at the exit polling in Ohio, where they won what I think is a Pyrrhic victory. I think ultimately will succeed in passing tougher pro-life restrictions in Ohio, but they won a ballot initiative.
It was quite surprising.
And the exit polling shows that 1 out of every 4 Trump voters voted for the initiative. In Kansas, it was even higher than that. So let me tell you what's getting ready to happen. They're qualifying initiatives in Arizona, Nevada, and Florida at a minimum. They're trying to get these on the ballot. They're going to be turning out Trump voters who tend to be more pro-choice than, say, I am or my organization. They're going to vote for the initiative, and then they're going to vote for Donald Trump. It's not going to help Joe Biden at all. And let me tell you what else is going to happen.
So you think they'll come out to vote, but they'll still vote for Donald Trump, but they'll still vote for the measure, but they'll also vote for Donald Trump?
The polling's clear on it. And not only that, Caitlin, but Trump will be able to say when he goes into those states, I'm the one who gave you the right to vote on this. He wants to deny you the right to vote on this. He's the one who wants to pass a federal radical and extreme pro-abortion law that would repeal all state restrictions and set it at the federal level. So you won't get to vote on it.
Yeah, he wants to codify the federal right to an abortion, which was overturned by the Supreme Court. We'll see how these candidates talk about it. It's one of the issues that's nearly guaranteed to come up on stage tonight. Ralph Reed, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Great to have you. And also coming up, we're going to get more analysis from our top political reporters. We're now in the final moments before Donald Trump and Joe Biden will meet for the first time in 4 years. This is debate night here at America. Stay tuned.
All right, take a look at this new video we're getting of Trump's motorcade arriving here at the CNN debate site. This now just a few hours before our debate gets underway. Our political experts are joining me right now with more analysis. And Nia, let me start with you. This race has been stubbornly close for months and months and months. Our latest CNN poll of polls, I'll put it up on the screen. You can see Trump's at 49%, Biden 47% among likely voters out there. What needs to happen tonight to change that?
Listen, they've got to have breakout moments and they've got to address their weaknesses. The primary weakness that Biden has is about age, but it is also about questions around the economy, questions around immigration, and questions around crime. And you know that Donald Trump is going to go hard at that. The questions that Donald Trump has to answer and address have to do with his character, his moral standing, January 6th, his authoritarian tendencies. He's got to figure out a way to get voters who were skeptical of him along those lines to come back to him in so many ways. The voters who left him in 2020, those sort of Trump to Biden voters. So he's got to figure that out. We'll see. And I think whoever has a breakout moment, can they capitalize on that in the weeks following the debate, right? Because we're going to have a 90-minute debate tonight, and people are going to mostly ingest this through clips and analysis that come after, right? And it's going to be moments. So they've got to figure out a way to not only have breakout moments, but then to capitalize on that going forward.
Both campaigns will be spending a lot of money with advertisements of highlights as they see them during the course of this debate. Jamie, I want to play for you and our viewers some of Biden's social media video that's coming out right now, underscoring a key contrast that's going on. Listen to this. Watch this.
Dictator, tyrant,
dangerous,
threat to democracy. I cannot in good conscience endorse Donald Trump.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
We worked with him. We knew him. This man is unfit to be president. A second term would be more dangerous than a first.
Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, they're fully prepared to take advantage of him.
Yes, I do regard him as a threat to democracy.
These are all some of Trump's former advisors, and this is a Biden campaign video.
Right. So the question is, to Nia's point, does this resonate? Does it keep getting played? And does it appeal just to Biden voters, or will it appeal to undecided voters? We've talked a lot about the double haters, people who don't want Trump or Biden. The question is, will that change someone's mind? There is no question that Trump's behavior is baked in. It's become normalized. So I think a big question for Joe Biden is, how does he persuade people that they need to remember that, and that's what's coming, that it's not overstating it?
At the same time, Manu, the Trump campaign released an ad making fun of Biden's age and his fitness. I'm going to play a clip for you. Watch this.
When you think about the Joe Biden you saw in the debate, ask yourself a question.
Do you think the guy who was defeated by the stairs, got taken down by his bike, lost a fight with his jacket, and regularly gets lost, makes it 4 more years in the White House? And you know who's waiting behind him, right? Vote Joe Biden today, get Kamala Harris tomorrow.
You think we're going to hear and see more of that from Trump tonight?
Well, I mean, that is a brutal ad. I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of that along the airwaves over the next several weeks. They're basically suggesting that Biden will not survive a second term in office. That is how this debate is going. But it really also shows, the Trump has been the expectation setting. They're saying that Joe Biden can't string 2 sentences together, yet at the same time also calling him an effective debater. That is going to affect the perception of how Joe Biden ultimately does, and perhaps Joe Biden could benefit from that. Actually, more voters, according to polls, believe that Trump will do better tonight than Biden. So if Biden exceeds those expectations, perhaps a lot of voters will think that he is capable of serving another 4 years. So this expectation setting can cut both ways against Trump.
Can I just quickly add, that also has a dog whistle about Kamala Harris.
Yes.
You can't get past it. And also the production value. That music, that is social media.
Mm-hmm.
That is TikTok. That is, from Trump's perspective, a brutal, devastating, but a brilliant ad for going viral on social media.
That's right. Yeah, and I think you're going to see more of that. To the Kamala Harris point, I think it's going to land with a certain segment of voters, this dog whistle that's very, very loud. But there are voters who really, really like Kamala Harris, right? And would love to see her be president. In some of these polls early on, she has high approval ratings than Joe Biden. So it sort of cuts both ways. If you're a young voter, if you're an African-American voter, if you're a woman voter, maybe you say, Kamala Harris wouldn't be so bad.
What do you think, Phil?
What I think is interesting about it is I don't think the people that they're targeting and the things you hear from both people that are tied to the campaign and advisors, Republicans on the outside as well, saying, talk about the economy, talk about immigration, talk about crime. Why? Like, I get it. And I think Jamie's point is actually critical here. The Trump operation from a social media perspective and their ability to use influencers, when we look at the subgroups that Joe Biden's coalition is lagging in right now, young voters is one of those coalitions. I don't know if these are the reasons why, but these are things that go viral on the places where people get their news. And so I think there's an effectiveness in that sense. But I also don't think that for the 7 states and 58,000 people that are going to decide, at least based on the 2020 numbers, who's going to win this election, when you talk to people around him, that's not necessarily where they want him to go. The one thing I would say about that, though, is he's not going there. The campaign is. Outside groups are. Outside advisors are. And so there's some value there. And I think if you look at the Biden campaign and what they're willing to say about Donald Trump, they've been much more aggressive than they were in 2020. They're much more aggressive on the types of platforms they're on, what they're saying, what they're willing to say. Joe Biden's not going to do that. That's not, A, it's not who he is, and he wouldn't do it to begin with. But B, they have one level of separation. I think that's why you're seeing the way it's playing out.
Important points, Art. Everybody stand by. We have a lot more to discuss. Trump and Biden are already taking swipes at one another, as we just saw on social media today. Insights on how personal attacks might get tonight. We're watching all of this as we watch Debate Night in America.
We are now just about 2 hours away from CNN's presidential debate here. I have someone here who knows firsthand what it's like to debate former President Donald Trump, and Carson did so in 2016 and then became one of Trump's closest allies and also one of his cabinet secretaries. The former Housing and Urban Development Secretary and retired neurosurgeon joins me now. So, Dr. Carson, it's great to have you here because you do have experience debating Donald Trump. You know what it's like to be up there on the stage with him. Everyone remembers the Republican primary in 2016. In the 2020 debate, the first one against President Biden, former President Trump became quite personal. He went after his family. I wonder if you think when you see Donald Trump on that stage tonight, you want to see him stay away from those personal attacks when he's debating Joe Biden.
There's so many good things that he can talk about in terms of the economy during his administration, crime during his administration, the border during his administration, interest rates. There's just a lot of good things to talk about, so I don't think it'll be necessary to dwell upon those things.
So you do believe it'd be more helpful if he talked more about the issues than say, something that's more personal. President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, for example.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that they both will take advantage of this historic situation in which we have the two administrations juxtaposed to each other. You don't have to think back many years, and you can compare the policies and see where they've taken us.
Yeah, and obviously everyone remembers when you were on stage, when you were competing with him in the Republican primary. I mean, he even lobbed personal attacks against you as well. On the issues here, obviously abortion is expected to be a major one. This is the first time we've had a presidential debate since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. Obviously, we saw that major decision from the Supreme Court today allowing those emergency abortions in Idaho. When it comes to how Trump is talking about abortion, though, and the 3 Supreme Court justices that he put on the court, you know, he often says he's proud of them, but then sometimes distances himself from the decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. Do you think he'll take credit for that tonight? What is that going to look like on that debate stage?
Well, obviously we'll have to wait and see, but you know, what he has done is try to bring the situation back to the state level, to the level of the people and their representatives, which I think is what the intention was of our founders, rather than having mandates proclaimed nationally. So I think that'll be good. I suspect he will also pivot to the area of extremism, because there are some people who advocate abortion right up until birth. And as a pediatric neurosurgeon who operated on lots of premature babies, I can tell you, you know, 25, 26, 27-week gestation baby, they feel pain. And when you reach into the uterus and pull them apart, they feel that. And I think we need to help people to understand what's actually going on and come to reasonable conclusions. And that's why it's better at the state level, because you can talk with the representatives and with the people who fashion the laws.
Yeah, and we've obviously seen other states that are extreme in the other direction where there are no exceptions for rape or incest, for example. Obviously, we do know that will be a major topic tonight. Dr. Ben Carson, thank you for joining us on what we do expect to see on the debate stage.
A pleasure. Thank you so much.
And my panel is back here with me in the spin room where all the surrogates and other people whose names are among those, including Dr. Ben Carson, potential vice presidential picks for Donald Trump. When it comes to what he wants to see on the debate stage tonight, Shermichael, he was saying that he believes there's so much for Donald Trump to talk about, whether it's his record or President Biden's, that he should stay away from the personal insults.
Yeah, Dr. Carson's right. I'm biased. I worked for Dr. Carson, love Dr. Carson. But Governor Kemp said the same thing in your interview with him yesterday, that there's a lot of potential for the president to make his case to the American people on issues of the economy, immigration, and including foreign policy. I mean, I think some Americans are a bit concerned about Chinese aggressions. What will the United States response be to China and their economic brick system and their attempts to devalue the dollar? Business leaders do care about stuff like that. So there's an incredible opportunity to speak to the nuance of those issues and how they have implications for the American people at the lower level all the way up to our wealthy CEOs.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of the personal attacks, I mean, he once compared Dr. Ben Carson to a child molester. I mean, that is how ugly the 2016 primary, Republican primary fight got with Donald Trump. Also, we saw, the National Enquirer publishing headlines about not just Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz that has gotten a lot of attention, but also, Dr. Ben Carson as well, who is now, one of his top surrogates.
Yeah, so look, I would think about this. I think there's very little chance that Biden is going to have a chance, the ability to really energize his own base in all of this. He can reassure them, right? He can make some wavering people come home, but I don't think he's got in him to fire up the base. Who has the ability to fire up the base for the Democrats is Donald Trump. And he could have answers tonight where he gets personal, which will make a lot of Democrats rally to Biden, be defensive of Biden. As Kristen will tell you, he has all sorts of potential landmines on answers about abortion. Abortion as an issue is going to have coattails for Biden, not the other way around. And if they've been practicing as much as they claim, if he hasn't prepared a bunch of ways to try and get that out of Trump, then he's going to fail tonight anyway.
Well, and for, it's not even just abortion. It's also IVF. It's access to medication. Mifepristone. Remember, Donald Trump told Time magazine in April that his plan for mifepristone would be coming out. That announcement never came. I mean, these are big questions that voters of both political stripes want answers to.
And on the stage, he's not going to be able to wiggle out of it as easy as he may have been in past experiences. So this is going to be a debate that I think is more about, do people get reassured that Biden's all there, that Trump can be president again, those sorts of things. But that doesn't mean that no substance is going to be important. And there are going to be ways that if candidates flub things like Donald Trump flubbing something on abortion, that's going to turn into an ad that we are going to see over and over and over again from now till November.
It might not be a flub, but it will be hypocrisy.
Energy.
Yes.
Energy tonight, to your point. Energy, energy, energy. That's where we began at 4 o'clock. Joe Biden has to bring that energy on the stage tonight, even when he's talking about issues like abortion.
Luckily, you have brought the energy this entire panel. Everybody has. You guys have been amazing.
I'm going to get the tequila out, and we're going to watch a good debate.
Yes. No tequila will be had here. Ahead, though, a Team Biden. We're going to mute Bakari's mic. So a Team Biden surrogate is going to be coming up next with what they expect to see on the debate stage. That is Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock in here as we are inching closer and closer to that historic showdown. In just a short time from now, you are going to see something that none of us have ever seen before. No matter how long you've been watching politics, paying attention closely, paying attention to those presidential debates, we've never seen a former president and a current president go head-to-head on a debate stage. But that is all going to change tonight when we see the rematch of Donald Trump and Joe Biden on stage. They will be 8 feet apart, as we know, inside the debate hall when all of this gets underway. My panel is back here with me. And Kristen Soltis Anderson, as we are looking at what tonight's going to look like, there is a very small amount of voters that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are trying to appeal to. And I think it's in the nuance of what they've been prepping and what that's going to look like in the moment of how they're reaching out to those voters. I mean, we know Donald Trump's base is with him, and Biden's base may not be energized for him, but they're still not going to vote for Joe Biden or for Donald Trump over him. How do they make that outreach on issues like immigration, the economy, abortion, as we've been talking
Well, you're right
about?
that tonight is going to be an opportunity for these two men to talk to the sort of voter who has not been following, say, Trump's legal troubles very closely, who has not been following, the news day in and day out. They've been out living their lives, and so now they're re-engaging as we get closer and closer to November with this big blockbuster moment. And so for those lower engagement voters, those are the types of folks that have actually been more in Donald Trump's camp. He does quite well with the type of folk that don't often watch the news, but know that Donald Trump has been good in business or those sorts of things. That's what I hear in focus groups from these lower engagement voters. They're going to be tuning in tonight to see, does Donald Trump show up and do something entertaining? And does Joe Biden show up and demonstrate that he's got it all together?
I think when I was on the campaign in 2020, I ran the coalitions department, and that's about stitching together a quilt of all the different communities in our country, from seniors to young Americans to African Americans to immigrants. And that is the challenge Joe Biden has to speak to tonight. I think that we are saying perhaps that there's a smaller group of voters that Joe Biden needs to speak to. And when I hear that, and I shouldn't assume, but when I hear that, I hear like Nikki Haley voters. I think if that's the only people Joe Biden tries to speak to tonight, that's a mistake. He needs to speak to his base. They aren't going to vote for Joe Biden, but as Bakari always says, they could stay home on the couch. And so today is the day to start to get the people ready to make a plan to go vote in November. Whether you're super excited about Joe Biden or not, you will do what you have to do to ensure Donald Trump.
Well, and that's what the timing of this is so interesting, is that this is the earliest presidential debate we've ever seen. A lot of voters start paying attention closer to the election when they're like, oh yeah, I've got to vote for whoever is going to be the next president. This is happening so much earlier for them to be tuning in, to paying attention to.
Yeah, well, that was smart of the Biden campaign to do that, because they needed to change the narrative, change the trajectory. There's never been a presidential debate in a general election prior to the second week of September, I think. So this is like telling people, hey, you got to pay attention now, get aware about early voting too.
And obviously one of the states that Biden won in 2020, that Donald Trump lost, which was historic in and of itself, is the one we're sitting in right now, the state of Georgia. And Wolf, that's been a key part of what we've been paying attention to, Donald Trump's relationship with the Republicans here, but also how the Biden campaign is using the representatives of this state as their surrogates this time around.
And Georgia obviously emerging as a battleground state itself. I'm here, Caitlin, now with Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia. He's a National Advisory Board member for the Biden-Harris campaign. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, the Biden campaign is hoping that tonight's debate can reset the race in their favor. What do you think the president needs to do to accomplish that tonight?
Well, thank you so very much, and welcome to Battleground Georgia. Listen, the president does not need my advice. But I'll tell you this, I've been moving all around my state, and the people of Georgia understand that there is so much at stake here. The good news in this moment is that this is a binary choice. The difference between these two men could not be more stark. The difference is between a man who has spent his whole life, I think in many ways informed by his own deep sense of loss and pain, serving people, and another man who's only thinking about himself. And he's especially focused on himself now that he's living under this cloud of all of these criminal convictions and charges against him. The American people going forward need someone who will be focused on them and who will be focused on ordinary people. That man is Joe Biden.
Here in your home state, Senator, a new Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll shows President Biden's support among black Georgians slipping to 69% compared to 88% back in 2020. Why do you think President Biden's support is falling among black voters here in Georgia?
Well, I can tell you somebody whose name has been on the ballot some 5 times in less than 3 years, that the polls don't tell you as much as the people do. The only poll that really counts is November 5th. And I think that the people of Georgia are going to get it right. Black voters are going to get it right. After all, black wealth is up some 60%. Since the pandemic. We've seen the narrowing of the racial wealth gap, in part because this is a president who had the courage to cancel student debt. I've been in rooms all across the state, Wolf, and every time I ask the question that I've been asking lately, have you had your student debt canceled, or do you know someone who's had their student debt canceled? I haven't been in a room yet where hands have not gone up. So what we've got to do between now and November is what I do every Sunday. I'm still the pastor of Ebenezer Church. I preach the gospel, which literally means good news. Even though it's good news, you got to tell it Sunday after Sunday, while at the same time continuing to build on the progress that we've already made.
So what you're saying, Senator, how should President Biden make that clear to voters? What should President Biden say on tonight's stage to make his case and really try to solidify his support with black voters?
Well, first of all, he's running against a man who is an existential threat. Donald Trump is a plague on the American conscience and the American nation. And black voters in particular ought to be concerned that the Oval Office could be occupied by a man who took out a full-page ad condemning the exonerated 5, used to be the Central Park 5, these young teenagers of a terrible crime they did not commit. And when they were proven to be not guilty, he's never apologized for that. He's never come around. Joe Biden is running on his record. He's running on a record of canceling student debt, of passing the largest tax cut for middle and working class families in American history. And Donald Trump is literally running on his criminal record, as if that's a reason for black voters to vote for him. Nothing could be more insulting. And at the end of the day, not only our base, the people of Georgia, and I believe the American people are going to get this right because there's so much at stake.
I want you to listen, Senator, to what a Republican senator, one of your colleagues, Republican Senator Tim Scott, said about the fact that he, Scott, is a top contender to be Trump's running mate. Listen to this.
And we Southerners get so little credit for the progress we've made. The whole notion of judging a person on the content of their character, not the color of their skin, has happened. It's not going to happen. It's not around the corner. It's in the rearview mirror. We are living Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream.
You're the head pastor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s former church. What's your reaction to what that senator says?
Well, as the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Dr. King preached, I know the progress that we have made as a result of his work and of the sacrifice not only of him, but people like Fannie Lou Hamer and so many others who stood up. America is better because of the civil rights movement. But we cannot rest on the laurels of those achievements. We have to continue to build. And I find it ironic, quite honestly, that my colleague talks about, lifts as Republicans often do, Dr. King's quote, that you ought to be judged not by the color of your skin, but the content of your character. When it came down to it, Donald Trump handpicked a football player who clearly was not qualified to be the senator from Georgia, I think, based on the color of his skin. It was a kind of cynical, racialized move. At the end of the day, black voters, the voters of Georgia, saw straight through it. And I'm the sitting junior senator representing the state of Georgia. We've seen this movie before. Donald Trump might try it again. He ought to remember what happened the last time.
One interesting note, the new Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll, Senator, also shows only 12% of young voters aged 18 to 29 support President Biden in your home state of Georgia. Is that a major alarm bell for President Biden? And what does he need to say tonight to try to turn that around?
I'm Gustavo Valdez in Atlanta, MD.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, we need a president who centers people rather than himself. And I think voters, regardless of their age, ought to ask themselves, well, what vision is Donald Trump laying out? When we were focused on trying to cancel student debt, he cheered the fact that the Supreme Court, with many of his nominees, canceled the president's original plan. He's boasting about the fact that he canceled Roe v. Wade. I think we ought to give him credit for that. And we ought to send Joe Biden back to the White House.
Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thanks very much for watching. Our special coverage of Debate Night in America continues right here, right now on CNN with Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett.